Hello everyone and welcome to this new Unreal Engine 5 C++ series. In this tutorial, we will be learning how to create a Flappy Bird clone for mobile devices. So by the end of the series, you will have a fully functioning Flappy Bird game with a high score system and scoring system as well as death system whenever you hit the pipe or the ground. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. The first thing we need to do is to create a blank C++ project target platform set it to mobile and quality preset scalable. Starter content and ray tracing, just leave them as false. And project name, let's call it Flappy Bird. Okay, let's create our project. Alright, now that our project is created, first thing we need to do is to get rid of this map. So let's go to content browser, new folder, let's call it maps, and go to file, new level, and just empty level. Let's save it inside our maps folder and call it Flappy Bird map. Great. Next, we need to go to the edit project settings and look for orientation. And we want our orientation to be portrait because that's how it's gonna look on mobile. So let's change it to portrait. And then we click on these three dots here, go to advanced settings and change our viewport resolution to portrait just by clicking on this one over here. And let's always center it to screen. So right now, if we go here and new editor window, we will get a portrait window. Okay, nice. Last thing we need to do before we start scripting is go to the settings on the top right corner, go to preview platform and choose whatever platform you want. I'm gonna choose Android for now. So what this does is that it's gonna render how the game will look like on Android because the colors might be different from on the Android from the PC. Okay, so right now it's enabled, and to disable it, you just unclick it here. Okay, so let's now create our first C++ class. Let's go to Tools, New C++ class, and choose a character as the parent class. Let's call it Flappy Bird character. Okay, great. Let's click Reload All and go into our header. And since our project was a blank project, we don't have anything in our play character. So let's create at least the camera for now. Okay, so we need to forward define the spring component and the camera component. Let's go to private, view property, visible anywhere, category. Good. Camera, okay, and view spring on component, and let's call it spring on. Let's copy paste this. View camera component. Let's call it camera. Now let's go back to our Flappy Bird character. CPP. Let's include the spring arm, the header for spring arm, game framework, spring arm component. And let's include the camera. Okay, and in our constructor, we want to create the spring arm and the camera. So spring arm is equal to create default subobject, use spring arm component, and let's call it spring arm. Let's attach it to the root component. Let's create our camera now. Okay, and let's attach it to the spring arm. Great. Now let's set the uh, arm length of the spring arm to a high value, like target arm length equal like 2300 maybe. This will actually make the camera go way back. So we have a, if you want a further view, and let's change its rotation because by default it will get attached to the player's back and we don't want that. So let me explain. By default, let's say this is our player and he's looking like this. The camera will be like so. Okay, the camera. We don't want that because Flappy Bird is a 2D game. So we want it to be this way. So Springer set relative rotation. Great. This will set the rotation like so. Okay, what else? Don't need anything in the camera. We don't need anything actually. So let's compile our code. Great. Now let's go to C++ classes and right click on the Flappy Bird character and create a blueprint class based on Flappy Bird character. Let's first create a folder here called blueprint. And the reason we are creating a blueprint, even it's a C++ tutorial, and that's because we want to just tweak some default values fast, so without compiling C++ class every time. And we can actually see how the character will look like in here. We will not be doing any scripting at all in here. It's purely C++. Okay, so don't worry. Okay, now if we look at the spring arm, it has a target arm length of 2300 and the rotation is minus 90, like so. So now we need our mesh. And to do that, we need to go to the content drawer, click on Fab. If you don't have this button here, you can go to Edit, Plugins, and search for Fab and enable this plugin. Okay, let's go to Fab and import a nice pack of characters. The pack I wanna import, where is it? Yeah, this one over here. and let's click on Add to Project. We will be using this character over here, the beholder. Okay, great. Now that our pack is imported, we go to Mesh here, go down to Skeleton Mesh Asset, and look for the beholder. I'm gonna go with this one, the poly art one, because it's lower poly and it's technically better for mobile, for performance. It's better than the PBR one. Okay, so I'm gonna set it. We need to rotate it, so it's gonna face the forward vector. So let's rotate it -90. And we need to scale it a little bit because it's too big. And let's set its location. Maybe like this. And the capsule component, we need to match the mesh. So maybe 60, 30, or 31. Yeah, this looks good. Yeah, I think that's good for me. Great. Maybe get it back a little. Minus 6, -4. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, okay. So now, if we drag our character in here, first let's set the animation asset to this one, walking forward animation. Make sure it's playing and looping. So the reason we are not creating a blueprint, it's because we don't have any other animation, only this moving forward animation. So we don't need blueprints or even a where is it? Even a blank space. We don't need that. It's just one animation, so we can just set it directly in here. So now if we start our game, the mesh is not visible at all, and that's because our level is empty and has zero source of light, and that's fine. We don't need any light. We will be using unlit materials to lit our scene. So let's go to the material assigned to this character, double click on it, and change the shading model to unlit. Also delete this texture, we don't need it, and we don't need this one here. We only need the main one. So let's take the RGB and connect it to the multiply node, and the value change it to 1. Great. Now if you go back to our map and play the game, we can actually see the character now. Okay, which is great, but we are not processing it yet. So to process him, let's go to our content, C++ classes, and create a new class and call it, inherit from game mode. Okay, make sure it's this game mode, not game mode base. Click next, and let's call it Flappy Bird game mode. Great. Let's go to our game mode header we need to override the virtual begin play method. So virtual void begin play override. Great. Begin play. Okay. Now we need to get a reference to this character in our game mode and process it. So on begin play, we get first. Let's go with Flappy Bird character. Let's include it here. Okay, Flappy Bird character is equal to also let's include items. This gameplay statics. There it is. Okay, so u gameplay statics get actor of class. So the u object where context object is the get word in, and the actor we want to get is a Flappy Bird character static class. So this will get us a reference to this character here. Okay, to the first instance of this character. And now we are getting an error because the actor of class will return a type of actor. As you can see, a value of type A actor cannot be used to initialize an entity of type Flappy Bird character. So we need to cast to the Flappy Bird, and to do that, we simply type cast a Flappy Bird character and add parentheses in the start and at the end. Great. Now it's working. Now we got a reference to our player character. So if this reference is valid, a Flappy Bird character. Okay. Um, a player controller. We need to get the player controller so we can process it. Is equal to u game play statics get player controller context is get word and index is 0. Now if we casted, we got it successfully, we need to process it. So player controller process, and the point process is Flappy Bird character. Okay, great. Let's go and compile. Let's go to our content drawer and create a blueprint out of this game mode. So create blueprint. Let's call it Flappy Bird game mode and it's called BP. Great. Let's close it because we don't need it. And now let's go to edit, project settings, method modes, and change our default game mode to the one we just created, the blueprint one. And we need the default pawn class to be equal to none because we are processing it through script. So if we start now, we should be processing this character. Yeah, as you can see, we are processing it. Nice. But it doesn't do anything yet because we don't have the functionality to flap yet. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Let's go to content drawer, new class, and scroll to the end, Unreal Interface. We will call it player interface. Great. Let's go, reload all. We don't need the CPP file, we just need the header. So let's create a function to flap. Virtual void flap equals 0, pure virtual function. And now let's include it. Let's implement it in our Flappy Bird character. So we go into the class, the header class, include player interface, and in here we need to add public player interface. Okay, now we can override the function we created. So virtual void flap override. Okay, so to flap the character, let me show you real quick. To flap him, we need to go upwards, right? Only upwards, not downward, not to the right, not to the left. So the force we need to add to the character is on the vertical axis. And we need to add it upwards, so the force must be a positive float value. Okay, so let's go here. Unreal Engine has a built-in function to launch the character. It's called launch character. It takes a vector parameter and two booleans. So for the vector, let's go for f vector 0.0f, so 0 for x and y, and for the z, we can create a parameter float, so u property, edit defaults only, category equal parameters. And let's create a float, let's call it flap strength. Okay, let's give it a default value of 900 maybe. We can tweak it later on, no worries. Let's go back here and add the flap strength. And for the booleans, we need both to be true to override the x, y, and z. Great. So our flap is ready, but we don't have any button, any key bind to it. So right now it doesn't flap unless we bind a key to it. So let's go to our content drawer, our root folder, create a new folder. Let's call it input, and we need to create a mapping input mapping context. Let's call it main underscore IMC, and let's create an input action. Let's call it IA underscore or flap underscore IA. Let's go into our input action, and in the triggers we need to add the pressed. Okay, so when we press it, it's gonna flap. And into our IMC we need to add the mappings, the one we just created, and we add a keybind to it. Let's say space. Okay, so to easily add a button, just press on this one, select it, and select the button you wish. Let's say I want Y, just click on Y, and it will do it automatically. Okay, great. How do you assign the space button to actually call this function? Well, we need to do it through C++ in here. But first, we need to get a reference to our player controller. And to do that, we want to create a function. Well, there are actually multiple ways to do it, but our way is going to be to create a function, to override a function actually, called possessed by. And this function is called whenever we are possessing the character. In our case, it's in the begin play of the game mode, right? So let's go to private here, virtual void possessed by a controller new controller override. So now we are overriding. If we go to our character parent class and we look for possessed by, we are overriding this function here from our parent character class. Okay, so let's create a definition for it, and super possessed by new controller. This will call the parent function of this function. Okay, great. Now we also need to create a variable of type player controller. So a player controller, and to give it a default value, null pointer, null ptr. It's empty. So now uh, player on possess, the player controller is equal to uh, cast a player controller, or casting the player controller, and the cast object is new controller. Okay, it's that simple. So now we can start biting our keybinds. Let's go to Flappy Bird character, and forward declare some components we will be needing. Class u input mapping context, and class u input action. And in our private, we will declare these variables. We will make a variable from them for them. So u property edit default only, category equal input, u input mapping context. Let's call it main, or main mapping context. And let's create another one for this input action. U input action. Let's call it flap action. Great. Now in our C++, so we are giving it a U property of edit defaults only, so we can easily assign them here in our class over here. Okay, in our player character class. So if you go back to our setup player input component function, we want to add a mapping context. Okay, so to do that, we check if our player controller is valid, and we need to check if our subsystem is valid also. Okay, so if you enhanced input local player subsystem, we need to include it here, enhanced input component, and enhanced this one, yeah, enhanced input subsystems. We need to include these two headers. Okay, let's call it subsystem is equal to u local player get sub get subsystem u enhanced input local player subsystem. Okay, player local player is player controller get local player. Okay, so if it's valid, we want to add the mapping context. So subsystem add, why am I getting an error here? Oh, we forgot the parentheses. So add mapping context, and the context you want, mapping context you want to add is the one you created here. So main mapping context. Okay, and priority, let's say 0. Great. Now let's bind the input, the flap action, to our flap function. So if you enhanced input component, enhanced input component equal cast view enhanced input component, and the object is player input component. The oh wow, I'm doing it in tick event. Let's just Control X this and paste it here. So the object is the player input component, the parameter. Okay. So if it's valid, enhanced input component, add action binding. No, sorry, bind action. Yeah, this one. Flap action, the input action you want to bind to, and on trigger event trigger, and the function is a Flappy Bird character flap. Oh, we don't need parentheses here, sorry. Okay, great. Now it should be working fine if we compile our C++ code. Okay, let's try it out. If we press space, actually it might be working, but because it's dark everywhere, we can't see it actually. So we need a background for now, a placeholder. So let's go to shapes here, add a new object shape plane. Let's rotate it, and let's give it a scale of 50 by 50. Okay, and let's go to content, new folder, call it materials, because if we start now, it won't be visible because the material is not unlit. So we need to create a new one. Let's call it emissive white. Let's call it. Go to shading model, unlit, and just change the color here to 1111 or your desired color. Save, and apply it to the plane. Just click on it here and click on this arrow. Okay, so now it's still not working, and that's because we haven't binded it here. So let's go for main. What do you call it? Let's just go for input because we gave it a category of input. So if we search input here, you can see them. So main mapping context is our main IMC, and the flap action is flap AI, whatever. So let's try it now. And it's working. He's flapping, but the gravity is very low. We should increase our gravity value so he falls faster. So to do that, we need to include a header for character movement. So game framework, character movement component, and in our constructor, we get the character movement component, and we set the gravity scale to be equal to maybe 3.0. By default it's 1, so let's increase it to 3 and let's compile. Okay, let's see now. Well, I don't think. Let's search for character movement. Graphic scale, it's still 1 for some reason. Maybe we need to exit the editor and then launch it again. But let's change it to 3 now, manually here. Yeah, it's falling so much faster. Great. Okay, so that's it for the tutorial. We now have a flapping, whatever this is, a beholder, not a bird. And I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And I will see you in the next one.